Hi guys, welcome to this video. In this video we'll analyze the passage. This is the first passage of CAT 2017, and in this passage we will go through all the paragraphs one by one. So let's get started. This is a passage based on maps. What does it say? What does it talk about, right? Understanding where you are in the world is a basic survival skill, which is why, like most species, come hardwired with specialized brain areas to create cognitive maps of our surroundings. First thing you do is you simplify this for yourself. Basically all this line is saying is that we try to understand our basic survival skill in the world that we have is we try to understand where we are. For this we create mental maps, right? And these are hard coded in our brains. Where are humans unique, with the exception of honeybees, is that we try to communicate this understanding with others. So the first line tells us we create maps. The second line tells us human beings are unique because we try to share this information with others. Third thing, we have a long history of doing this by drawing maps. The earliest version which were discovered was scrambled on cave walls 14,000 years ago. Human cultures have been drawing them on stone tablets, papyrus, paper, and now computer screens ever since. So basically the first paragraph sets up the discussion here. It's going to revolve around the topic of maps. One, it tells us it's a basic skill. Second, it tells us that human beings, we share our knowledge of maps with others. This is how we distinguish from other species. Third, we have a long history of creating maps. So this is what the basic discussion is. This is how you should summarize every paragraph for yourself, right? Let's move on to the second paragraph. Given such a long history of human map making, it is perhaps surprising that it is only with the last few hundred years that the North has been consistently considered to be at the top. In fact, for much of human history, North has never appeared at the top. According to Jerry Broughton, a map historian, North was rarely put on the top for the simple fact North is where darkness comes from. So this paragraph just tells us one thing, that North was never put on the top, and the reason was that North is the place from where darkness comes from, and West is also unlikely to put at the top because West is where the sun disappears. Again, the association with darkness, right? Confusingly, very early Chinese maps seem to buck the trend. So that means they basically put North at the top, right? So this is what this means. So the second paragraph was about North being not at the top. The first paragraph basically introduced the topic to us of maps, right? So if we note it down for ourselves, maps, North. The third paragraph is about the Chinese bucking this trend. How did they do so? But Broughton says even though they did have compasses at the time, that isn't the reason that they placed North at the top. Early Chinese compasses were actually oriented to point south, which is considered to be more desirable than the deepest, darkest north. But in Chinese map, the emperor who lived in the north of the country was always put at the top of the map, with everyone his subjects looking towards him. In Chinese culture, the emperor looks south because that is where the wind comes from. It's a good direction. North is not very good because you are in a position of subjugation to the emperor, so you look up to him, right? So the reason for putting North on top was not the fact that it was geographically correct. Geographically, they were still, their compasses were pointing to the south. The reason was that is where the emperor looked. That is where the emperor lived, at the north of the country. Hence you looked up to him, you looked towards him, right? That's why the maps pointed north, and the emperor looks south because that is where the wind comes from. So the Chinese reason for the maps being correct is actually in this given case, right? The Chinese reason is not the geographically correct one, right? It's not the scientifically correct reason. Given that each culture has a different idea of who or what they should look up to, it's perhaps not surprising that there is very little consistency in which maps are pointed. So this paragraph is going to be about lack of consistency in maps. So this was about Chinese maps. So this is the mental notes that you should be making in the passage while reading it. In ancient Egyptian times, the top of the world was east, the position of sunrise. Early Islamic cultures famous to the south because of early Muslim cultures were at the north, so they imagined looking south towards it. Christian maps from the same era put east at the top towards the Garden of Eden with Jerusalem at the center. So we can see that different in terms of different cultures, there were different reasons, right? Egyptians put it in the east, Islamic maps favored the south because of the early Muslim cultures were north of Mecca. They looked again they imagine looking up south towards it, right? Similar reason to the Chinese one. And Christians, they looked towards east because that is where the Garden of Eden was, right? So when did everyone get together and decide that the north was on the top? So now he's probably going to tell us the reason, that when were the maps fixed, right? When were the maps corrected? It's tempting to put it down to European explorers like Christopher Columbus or Ferdinand Magellan, who were navigating the North Star. So it's saying it's tempting to put it down. So this line itself, it raises a question, right? It implies that it was actually not these people. But Broughton argues that these early explorers didn't think of the world like that at all. When Columbus describes the world, it is in accordance with east being at the top. Columbus says that he's going towards paradise, so his mentality is from a medieval mappa mundi, right? So Christian maps from the same era, these are called mappa mundis, right? It refers to maps from a particular area. So what was Columbus's theory with respect to maps, or what kind of mentality that he had with respect to maps? He had the same mentality as in the medieval era, right? He describes the world with east being at the top. We've got to remember, as Broughton, at the time, that no one knows what they are doing and where they are going. So the passage ends on an inconclusive note. Basically, fifth paragraph does not tell us that when did maps got corrected. It tells us the fact that Columbus and Ferdinand Magellan also got it wrong, right? So if you build the thematic chain or the thematic theme of the whole passage, the first passage tells us that we make maps, right? Human beings are different from others because we share our understanding with others. Second paragraph tells us that we've been making maps absolutely wrong, right? Or in the past, if we look at the history of map makings, our maps were incorrect. Then he tells us that how did the Chinese end up making maps correctly? They pointed to the north, but their reason was not the correct one. Then it tells us that what did different cultures do in the fourth paragraph, and the fifth paragraph tells us how did Columbus and Magellan also get it wrong. So this is what the passage tells you. These are the 5 key things that you remember from the passage while solving the questions, right? So this is the information you derive for solving the questions, right? Hopefully you got the analysis of the passage and you understood what the passage stands for, right? Thank you very much for watching this video, and happy learning.